Hello, everyone. This is a talk I'm going to give about my own work, my own life, but it's the title is Finding a Voice. It applies to everyone. You have to find your own vision in life. You have to find you have to try and live your dreams. And I chose to be an artist, and but it's been a very difficult career. But eventually, I found my voice in my work, which I had from quite young, as you'll see. But I found my voice in standing up for my art, promoting it, making myself a well-known artist. And this is to everyone that struggles in life. And I hope this talk is interesting, using my own example of growing up in England in the 70s, the problems I faced. Okay, I'm going to start with my family background. This photograph, this woman in the corner is my grandmother. She came from Aden, which is in the tip of Saudi Arabia. And she's also got Eritrean blood in her. And Aden was a British protectorate, so there were a lot of fighting going on, and they had to escape. And that's when they came to Britain in the 1950s. 1954, they came as refugees. Now, anybody that is of my vintage will remember the food of Britain in the 1970s. Cabbage boiled for about 5 hours and vegetables steamed to death. And the only herb was white pepper. So every time I went to my granny's house and had this wonderful Middle Eastern food, it was like, I knew I had other cultures running through my blood, and I knew what tasty food was. The next photograph is in 1971. I'm in the corner holding a packet of fish and chips. It was a May Day festival, and the girl next to me is called Jenny, a mixed race girl. Her mother used to work for my parents as they had a dress design business, and her mum was a sewing machinist. And me and Jenny she's my first best friend. Whenever we were together, they always thought we were brother and sister. So if my mum was with us, is that your mum? And then vice versa. So I grew up in a kind of very early childhood. I grew up in England where I was born in Notting Hill Gate. I didn't mention it, in London, which at the time was the most multicultural area in Britain. In my school, Holland Park, there were 220 languages spoken, which is pretty unusual even today. So at this point, I didn't quite know what racism was, because my friends at school and at people that worked for my parents were from Japan, India, Pakistan, China, Japan, and Caribbean, and everywhere, and Middle East. But it was about the age of 8 where I was in a playground, and there were 3 white boys, and they pinned me down to the ground and lit a match on my stomach and told me to go back to my own country, which I did. I screamed like mad, which scared them, ran around the corner to my mum's house, because that was my country. In the 70s, there was a lot of racism. You would be in buses and go back to your own country type stuff was heard a lot. Now, first of all, I was very lucky being in Notting Hill Gate, because Bob Marley made his first album, Exodus, in Notting Hill, Island Records. And we had Aswad, Black Uhuru, many of these bands were playing. So reggae was my first music scene. But then I got to 12 years old, or 13. Well, 12 when I first heard Sugar Hill Gang, and 13 where I heard Africa Mombasa and the Soul Sonic Force. And from that day, my life was changed. I not only became one of the first break dancers in London, but also one of the first graffiti artists. There's actually a book coming out of graffiti pioneers, and I'm in this book. My name was One Up, And it was the best thing you could have ever happened to you as a teenage boy. We weren't sitting by bus stops, nothing to do. We were practicing breakdancing. We were going to clubs. There used to be a Saturday club for teenagers called Spats, where everyone would challenge each other to breakdancing. And I met a lot of my heroes at the time. I met Africa Mombata and so many other early graffiti and breakdancing people. I even met Basquiat when I was 14, when he came to London. And it was the first time, because I was a really shy boy who was bullied a bit at school. And it was the first time that I got status in the area. When we would battle another crew, I'd have to walk from one train station about 15 minutes to the youth club where we'd be battling them. And all along the way, there were these kids going, cheering us on, like, yeah, go for it, one up, go for it, break jam crew, you're going. And it was just an amazing thing, because a few years earlier, this was in 1983, 84, but it started around 1982. Only a few years earlier was the punk rock movement. And hip hop was the kind of punk rock for black people and people of color. The turntables became a new instrument, which was amazing. And basically all the music we listen to now has come out of this period. I got to the age of 16. What's happened? Sorry. Yeah, and this is the age I was about 14. I'm in the middle. That's me when I had hair before I lost it all. My hair was and this was the age at 14 that every time I left my house at this age to 15, I'd get stopped by the police. Yeah. Always with the same question. I'd walk out the house to go, my friends and me were wanting to explore the area at night. They'd come and stop us after about 15 minutes and say, there's been a robbery or there's been a break-in in a car and you meet the description. They would search us but it happened like about 10 times. So for 1 year, I barely left the house at night. And even now, when I walk past police, I still have that feeling. Anyway, but in the other sense, it gave me a lot of, this is Cool KD and Sir Drew. Sir Drew was from LA. He was one of the first rappers in Britain. And they made the first hip-hop records. It was called London Bridge is Falling Down, made in 1983 by the Crew. So I was in this amazing scene. These guys were about 5 or 6 years older than me. So I was like, yeah, what a teenage years. I mean, yeah, I had bad skin. I had I was shy around women, but my God, the warehouse parties and the things I saw some of the best DJs in the world at the time. It was an incredible teenage years. Then my father had a very, very good friend from art school days. My father was taken when he arrived at St. Martin's School of Art in 1959 to the hall. The hall was about the size of this room, and wrapped round the hall 3 times round was this painting. And there was a pile of sketchbooks this high, and there were giant portraits of horses and loads of figures, like 90 figures on it. And the head of St. Martin's at the time said to the students, this is what one student did last summer. And his name was Robert Lenkovich. Now, at 16 years old, I was the good kid at art at school. But I saw Robert, and Robert said to me, look, go to the National Gallery, go and see this painting called The Rokeby Venus by Velasquez. And also look at Jasper Johns, his American abstract painter. He used a lot of numbers and letters in his language. And that was amazing. Jasper Johns, I could see the connection to graffiti art. But when I saw Velasquez, I saw the Toilet of Venus, which is a painting, a nude without edges. There's no details. You can't see hands or feet. They're just smudges. It's all atmosphere and air. one nice little story. And that painting changed my life. I became a painter. I stopped being a graffiti artist. I became a painter overnight from that moment in the National Gallery. A lovely twist to this story is in 1 month, in a few weeks' time, my paintings are in the Walker Art Gallery, Liverpool. The Rockaby Venus is going to the Walker, and my painting is going to be a few rooms away from the painting that made me a painter, which I'll show you it later, the painting of mine. So yeah, things have an amazing story. So basically, a year later, I'm in the lower sixth form. I'm about 17. Robert comes and sees my work that I've been doing at school for my sixth form. We had a life class, which was quite progressive at the time. And I was the kid that was called, "You're brilliant at art, Nahem" guy. I was the guy that everyone thought was brilliant. But this Robert Lenkiewicz came to me and he said, "Show me your work." And then I showed him my work and he goes, I thought you'd be a lot better, It's very weak. And he goes, "Oh, what do you mean it's weak?" Well, he said, you're painting with hope on the end of your brush. And I said, "What do you mean hope on the end of my brush?" He said, "Well, you paint 10 pictures and you hope one of them turns out okay. I can put knowledge on the end of your brush." And he started to teach me the craft of painting. I want to show you. But he did something. I did a project on multiculture in my 30s. He did projects about vagrancy or mental handicap, but no one was doing it. More than did it, he housed people. He housed people in houses. He broke into warehouses, found people homes. Used to have this amazing Christmas parties in his house where all the tramps and the dossers would come. The smell was so strong of poo, I'm sorry to say. But it was like a scene it was like a Last Supper out of the Bible. These 15 bearded tramps having Christmas dinner in his kind of house. Anyway, he did these projects when no one else was. People weren't housing the homeless then in Plymouth. He was the first people to house them and arrange food for them. And he did these 500 paintings on homelessness. These are two. This is the guy called the Bishop. And this is, I forgot this guy's name now, Snowy. Incredibly brilliant painter from life. So super powerful. So he started, and then he gave me lessons in tone, basically, in color. That's Jenny again. So my first drawings were of people of color, actually, since I was 17 years old. So Jenny, the girl in that photograph from the very beginning, she posed for us in my mum's art class. And I was 17 years old when I was making these drawings. And almost I discovered my world was going to be my subject matter. And then these are the lessons that Robert Lenkiewicz gave me. You can see a gradiate system between black and white. Nothing could be nothing in the world is as white as pure white, and nothing is as black as pure black. So you have to make things always slightly darker than pure white and slightly lighter than pure black. And it's in that gradation that you start to create realism and light. So here's an example of it where it's the color still life. It wasn't done in this light. It was done in another place. This was in a museum display. The color still life painted in black and white. So it's the black and white. It's the tone of the color. And everything is seen as a whole. So there's no drawing in this technique. It's all about shape and color. And it's very, very accurate at painting the color of air, painting realism in art. So 1 year I was a graffiti artist. And said I was a well-known graffiti artist in London, one of the early graffiti pioneers. And then a year later, I was a classical artist. Massive change. This was a drawing. I spent 1 month in the V&A drawing, about 200 hours of drawing in this. It now belongs to the V&A collection. And then, this is my father. So, after being trained by Robert, I started to paint family members like my parents. At the time, this was total. I was at art school at the same time. At this time in British art, they were totally against craft and technique and painting from observation. I mean, it was. I was literally on the very first day. I actually brought this and about 10 landscapes I painted to the art school at Manchester, and I had 20 students and all the lecturers telling me painting like this is dead. It's all been done before. A camera can do it better. I think those qualities about a psychological portrait I had at 18 years old. And this is a drawing I did of my mum when we were in Greece. It was at night and it's on our hotel window. And it looks like something out of like a Millet or a Courbet painting. But I had a feeling already at a very young age for portraits, for capturing people's moods as well as likenesses. And I said, I was already a rebel because I was already at art school told that this kind of painting is dead. And I believed there was still life in it. I believed that not everything had been said. And also, as me at art school in Manchester, and so, sorry, keep it. Yeah, and then this painting here was painted in my degree show at Manchester. So my friend Desmond, he's my best friend at the time. We met in London in Holland Park School at 11 years old. And he was also trained by Robert Lenkovich. So we had this in common. We were like, I said, at art school, they hated what I was doing, the lecturers, except the sculpture tutor. He said to me, since he's been there for 20 years, he hasn't had a student as talented as me. So he gave me that belief to keep going. And in all the competitions at the time, I was getting rejected. And later on, it was... the art world was so a closed shop. It was so racist at the time that even people would say to me, change your name. I knew when I'd written my name down on a form, it was almost being chucked in the bin before they'd looked at it. And so there's there's a great sweet justice in this because the art school didn't like me, and this painting was in my degree show. And I'm the only student to leave Manchester School of Art that now has this painting permanently in the Manchester City Art Gallery, one of the best art galleries in the country. And it's on display for another 2 years. It's great. And I was so pleased it was this painting because I knew my lecturers, if they're still alive, will be so annoyed if they saw that painting. They'd be so jealous because, they always wanted to make it and they never made it. Here's Desmond, here's myself. This is me and Desmond at 19, being taught by Robert Lenkovich, being seen as outsiders at art school. And then when I started my project on multiculture, where you see the painting of Benga in the gallery, I started it really in Desmond's studio. That's a painting of Benga of mine, and me and Desmond used to share models together because we couldn't afford to pay anyone, so we'd paint our friends. And we're still like brothers. I mean, known since I was 11 years old, and it's we both had very difficult careers. I'm going to show you something now. Yeah, that's my painting of him, and that's his self-portrait with the yellow waistcoat. That was painted in 1993. The British art world at the time was so prejudiced and so that there's a gallery called Beaux-Arts. It used to be a really big gallery in the 90s. And a friend of mine called Justin Mortimer, there's quite a well-known painter today, he was having a show, a group show there, and he invited his friends. The owner called Reg Singh, and I'm mentioning his name because he's still alive and he deserves it, basically where the drinks were, said in front of me and Desmond, he said, don't serve those two. And Justin, to his credit, was so angry that he left the gallery the next day. He resigned from the gallery because At that point in 1993, I'd already won the Royal Society of Portrait Painters. This was in a very prestigious show called the Hunting Prize at the time. So we were some of the most highly awarded artists in that gallery, but we were not going to be looked at. And that painting again of Desmond is now next to the Mona Lisa or black images of the 18th century. This painting is called Portrait of an African. It used to be thought to be Equiano, then Sancho, but from being told that we're not even good enough to be in a private view, to my painting being put next to the most important black painting of the 18th century. I've tried to do this talk so we're going from something negative to something positive, how you've got to keep believing. This talk is called Finding a Voice. Never letting yourself be silenced. Because it's so easy in life to be silenced, to lose your voice. And it was around this period, around this painting was painted in 1997, that I said, look, I'm getting so many rejections. All my black paintings are being, and paintings of myself are all being rejected. I can't get things to happen. I said, and all my friends I'm speaking to in different professions, in music, in other professions, they couldn't make acting, they couldn't get anywhere, and I said, you know what? Let me make a project called Multicultural. Let me celebrate this thing that keeps being. Let's start highlighting these things that no one is talking about. And luckily, one museum, first of all, Plymouth City Art Gallery, a guy called Martin Thomas, took my show on. It was 2000, it was 1999 at this point. And he said, I can't give you a big show until 2004. And I only had 11 paintings. So for the next 4 years, I basically had models coming into my studio from 9 o'clock, 3 people a day, for 3 hours a day each. And one would leave, and one would come, and then one would leave, and one would come. And they started to recognize each other in the street because they'd pass each other by and say, oh, aren't you so-and-so? Aren't you so-and-so? It was white and black people. It wasn't only black people, because I said it's multicultural. I was trying to celebrate my world, the world that's become normal today. And yeah, I didn't have a studio. You're going to see some photographs of what I had. I had to paint in my flat. And this is one of my early paintings of James. This painting I did it when I was younger, 22. But I was also showing you that I was painting white skin as intensely as I was painting black skin. This painting has been exhibited with Lucian Freud and Arbuck here it is being displayed next to Frank Arbuck and Sickett. And there's another painting of mine of Dan in an exhibition in Southampton called Face of Britain. Again, a political title saying, what is Britain in the 21st? What is the face of Britain now? And the poster was a poster of Wenger as the face of Britain. Because when I made this project on multicultural, every museum was rejecting me. Even Southampton. Now, ironically, I've got the rejection letters from 2003, 2005, 2008, from Southampton, from the Walker, from Manchester. And in the last 3 years, I've had exhibitions in all 3 of these museums. And the same work that they were rejecting, they all came back with the same answer, that their core audience wouldn't respond to my project at the time. They've all been very, very popular exhibitions. I mean, Black Presence that I did in the Atkinson in 2019, I went and did a self-portrait exhibition a few years later called Unselfish Selfie. And Stephen Whittle, who was the curator of the museum, said to me, Black Presence changed the way we collect now. You know, we've completely changed what we're buying for the collection. So yeah, that vindicates my original project where you're going to see, that's my studio, my bed, my sitting room. That piece of lino, my magic carpet, I used to call it, was my studio. It's a tiny sitting room, as you can see. Look at the size of the paintings I was painting in this one-bedroom flat. There wasn't a flat, it was a studio. I had, in my kitchen, I had 20 paintings on the wall, but it was wonderful. I had about 15 people a week coming to sit for me, and they weren't being paid. I never had a studio. I had no name. And these paintings were taking between 30 to 50 sittings, usually about 3 hours each sitting. The ones of Gbenda, he sat for longer. He would sit from about 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And on the very last sitting of each painting, they would all say, when are we going to start the next one? Because I don't paint people in silence. We talk the whole way through it. It's just a conversation. And that's why I paint from life. I'm trying to capture those little bits of magic, what we all have when we're in life, where a little bit of truth is revealed, hidden away. It might take you 4 months to find that bit of truth. But people would say to me, you've caught something I never showed to anyone else. And then they'd be crying sometimes after the painting was finished because it revealed a truth that they know. But that's my studio, that lino for that at that period. What happened was I got to 30 and I said, I was 28 when I started, but about 30 I said, I can't be an artist that doesn't make it and not compete with the best. I've got to do something that gives me self-worth because I'm not making any money here. I can't feel like I'm trying to paint my one picture for the BP Portrait Awards. And yeah, I ended up doing 70 black portraits in this period, and another 50 white portraits. So it was an amazing period of my life. My work is on display right now in 11 museums across England, all painted on that piece of lino, all rejected for 10 years. No one wanted it, and now it's on display in 11 museums. This is the museum it's on display now with. One of the most famous Hockney paintings, and my portrait of Gbenda that you saw on that, I'll go back. That was the last sitting of that painting of Gbenda. There's the painting in the background. There's the painting with David Hockney. Both portraits are based on the Arng painting, the Valpicon Venus. A great moment in my career. That's what you can go and see that now in the Walker Art Gallery in Liverpool. To think, well, that painting of Gbenda is, again, it was, I was trying to confront stereotypes. I mean, I kept hearing every time I was out about black men being aggressive. It was on the news the whole time. I wanted to paint Gbenda in the most soft, gentle, tender pose to convey his character. That's what Gbenda is. That is Gbenda. Gbenda is the most warm, gentle, kind, brilliant man I know. And Hockney, when he painted this in 1966, homosexuality wasn't legal in England until 1967. So this kind of cute, pretty picture, giving you that kind of LA kind of, modernism style, was a very radical picture at the time by Hockney. The Gbenda one, again, it's like a very beautiful picture, but it was quite radical. So the two radical pictures, actually this painting is in the John Moore's room. It was quite nice having my painting of all the John Moore winners. And there's Gbenda now. This was painted in 2001 and 2, and this is Gbenda in 2019 in my Black Presence exhibition. You can even see now what a great likeness it is, and how much power this portrait. This portrait, I've just been told yesterday, is in a British Museum touring exhibition, and it's going to be next to Manet. Manet is the father of modernism, basically. So it's a great honor. And there's a self-portrait by Desmond Horton on the other side. Because my friend Desmond wasn't getting any recognition. He couldn't exhibit anywhere. So I started to put him in my exhibitions. So we can add new chapters to our story. I want to make a really interesting novel, kind of one of those kind of Russian novels like the Brothers Karamazov that used to become serialized. So each year you get another chapter of my story. And Gbenda is a very good painter in his own right. And there's me painting the back of Benga's head in Desmond's studio. I think when you see the painting of the back of Benga's head, I think it's wonderful to see Gbenda, the presence of him, the power of him, the beauty of him, to see what I'm looking at, really. You see a head in a painting, it's just a head. And then you see this beautiful man that I'm painting. And there it is. He had more hair then when he was younger. Like me, he's lost a lot of his hair. But it's a wonderful likeness, isn't it, of Gbenda? Because you know when you walk down the street and you see a friend from behind and you can recognize them 100 meters away. That's the feeling I get when I see Gbenda. And what an iconic, and this is to my tutors in Manchester who said painting is dead. That's a very radical painting for 2024 still. And it's a portrait. Unique. There's very few backs of heads. I mean, you can go to Magritte and things, but that's still a very unusual painting. And it happened to be painting from life, supposedly portraiture's dead. But the one thing painting can do, it can bring texture and surface. And I try to make my surface as abstract as possible, to try and go towards abstraction in some of them, and yet get the most high level of realism. There's Gbenda again. You can tell Benga's very proud of this painting. And this painting is on the Graves Art Gallery now. And it was on the poster of my Face of Britain exhibition. There's Desiree, another one of my great friends who posed for 12 paintings. I wanted to paint like really, I'm not really a fan of the life class kind of nude. I don't like the model being this just an object. I don't like nudes that are about kind of a sexualized image. I want to paint the nakedness as about the inner presence of someone's soul in a way. When I was painting these pictures of Desiree, I felt I was, at some point, we were so intimate because we were never lovers, only friends. But I felt like my brush was going inside her heart. It felt so tender and so intimate. There was a naked self-portrait, not because it's meant to, because I felt if she's taking her clothes off and she's not a life model, I have to take my clothes off. And so we're equals in the painting because I really didn't want to paint myself naked. It was the last thing I wanted to do. And there's Desiree in my first show at Plymouth, looking super cool. Because I told you, my exhibition was called Multicultural Youth Culture, because I love the street styles of the day. And this is my painting of Gbenda taking the knee, but made in 2002, based on Martin Luther King taking the knee. This is a very bad photograph of the painting, but this painting was offered to the Tate in 2020, and they turned it down because they couldn't afford to, they said they don't have the space and they won't be able to restore it in the future. They have the money to restore it. Even though they were claiming that they want more black images in their collection. I would have thought a painting of taking the knee done 20 years before it became an image that we see everywhere would have been something to talk about. And there's another painting of Desiree now in the Lang. It's wonderful to think that this painting of Desiree was rejected by the Summer Show and the National Portrait Gallery, and now it sits next to Lavery and Dodd Proctor, Matthew Smith and Ben Nicholson, and there's Stanley Spencer on the corner and Sickett's, and she's looking pretty powerful there. It's it's one of those very proud moments when you walk into a museum and you know the story of this painting's history. And then the Lang were always rejecting me as well. I've got letters from them saying my work doesn't fit their collection. And now it's become one of their star paintings. It's a great feeling to do something, and for 10 years you can't sell them, you can't barely survive as an artist, and yet you were right. You did a project that was 20 years ahead of its time. So, and there's the Desiree in the Walker now. And that's Desiree in 2004 standing in front of the same painting. And Tiffany's another model friend of mine. Yeah, and I also wanted to say that I was also painting white friends. This is another student of mine, Caroline Paul, a brilliant painter herself, amazing landscape painter, had her work in the Ipswich Castle Museum recently, next to Monet, actually. So I was trying to paint, I was painting my friends, basically, my world. Portraits, when you paint portraits as commissions, you're often painting someone's vanity. You're not painting them, you're painting an idea of them. So you get something that has no emotional weight to it. It feels like the person showing off, or like a selfie. I was always trying to paint someone's emotions. And there's my work in the face of Britain. So what's quite interesting is that 1 minute I'm showing myself next to masters, then I'm showing to Christopher, modern paintings. My work seems to go very well with old and new paintings. Actually, you can't see it, but the painting that would be in front of Louise's was Sargent. And there's a you and you glow over there. So what's interesting, that Christopher was painting that picture around the same time I was painting Gbenda. So it's two artists painting about race in a very, very different ways, but both producing incredibly new pictures. As far as I know, I'm the only painter to paint from live giant heads. All the rest of them have been done from photographs. Hence why mine took a year to paint. And there's a Peter Doig in the corner, actually. Yeah, two of my heroes. I love Peter Doig's work and I love Christopher's work. Actually, Christopher is amazing because it's a group portrait. Why is it in a portrait exhibition? Why have I got the Christopher in it? Because those little dots are portraits of all the black stars of the day. And people like Nelson Mandela, and Snoop Dogg and Tupac, they're all in that. And, and then, so it's a group portrait. Like you'd get, because, and there's my painting again with portrait of an African, portrait of Desmond, one of my favorite paintings. Again, my painting of Dan next to Sickett. Two men wearing hats, 100 years apart, these paintings. But Sickett's world, Sickett would have never ever been around. Sickett never painted one black person in his whole career. His world was a totally white world. And this is how much Britain has changed in two images, Yeah, this is from that show. And I've got Desmond's work in this show, and there's Tiffany now and back of Benga's head. And there's Sonia Boyce and Gwen Johns. Yeah, but I don't, but I've been doing different kind of work in the last, I haven't done a portrait since 2015. And I haven't done a giant head since 2006. But I'm doing portraits of trees now and things. I go back to nature. This is an olive tree, about an 800-year olive tree. And I had to ask it if it would sit for me. And I spent 2 weeks in a 40-degree heat in Spain painting this amazingly survivor that goes back to the Moors of Spain, And then I do this completely different kind of work. Now, hard to believe, the two artists. This is based on my tree drawings. I'm still painting the street fashions and people of different cultures, because I still love street fashion. But there's a little reference to the Shard behind one of the mountains. But it's a combination of London and this place in Spain that I paint, but totally imaginative. Yeah, and this was done in response to the COVID pandemic. And these are friends of mine. This is Yaya, and this is Chris. And it was, for a while, I couldn't paint anything about the COVID pandemic. But then the George Floyd thing happened. And obviously it's got the rainbow colors there. But I wanted to kind of talk about how difficult people of color to stand out, and how silenced they've been. So I'm referencing nature in one sense, and all the discarded rubbish I was seeing. Everyone was talking about how much they love nature, but every park you went to was strewn with litter and all the things thrown away. But I also wanted to say they're being hidden. They're dressed in the most colorful clothing. The mask is also being silenced, not being allowed to speak, and they're being hidden. They can't fully reveal themselves. And the title of this project was Seen and Unseen. Because I said, there's a story when me and Desmond went to Paris when we were about 25. When we got to we got to the ferry port, we were the only people stopped by the customs, the British customs. No one else was stopped but us. What are you going to do? We had to tell them we're going to see art in Paris. When we got to Paris to see this Matisse exhibition, as we walked from our hotel, it was about an hour walk to the Grand Palais. We had to sit, after about 20 minutes, we said, let's sit down in a square. The moment we sat down, literally 3 minutes, 5 French police came up and said, shouted, speaking in French. We said, no, we're English. And then we got our passports and they kind of grumbled and then they kind of just saw that we were English passport and they said, go. So we were still walking and then it's very hot like today. And then as we got closer to it, it was actually the Pompidou Center. We sat outside the Pompidou Center before we went in. Another 4 police came and stopped us. And same thing, what are you doing? So we went and saw the exhibition. That was fine, amazing, one of the best exhibitions I've ever seen. An incredible Matisse exhibition. Every room had about 5 masterpieces. Same thing, we got out, we went and had a coffee. 3 more police came. Again, we were stopped. And we ended up being stopped in like 3 days by about 12 times by the police in Paris. And it was that strange feeling because we were some of the most cultured people there, me and Desmond. And when we left Paris on the coach, we got to the ferry stop. And then the only people that were stopped by the British customs were me and Desmond again. But then they said, what were you doing in Paris? I said, we just saw Matisse, went to the Louvre. And they go, are you artists? Yeah. I said, I've got a painting in the summer show. And he said, yeah, I'm going there with my wife. What's the number of your painting? I'll look out for it. And they let us through, like, oh, great. But that's a very intense kind of world to live in, where you are not accepted in that way, where you go to Paris. I remember going a year after with my girlfriend, who's white English, to Paris. And I wasn't stopped this time, but I was on the top floor of the Pompidou Center. And then suddenly about 200 police swooped in, and every Middle Eastern or black person was taken up. About 200 people were swooped in by the police and arrested. And I thought, my God, thank God I wasn't there that year. And thank God I had a British passport. Anyway, and this is another painting. It's called News from Nowhere. It's based on a William Morris novel where the narrator comes back in the 22nd century to London. And London has just become one big forest from London to Croydon. And the narrator I have as a black woman. She's my narrator for this utopian ideal of the world. Okay, that's my story, the artist story. Thank you.